What I want to be covering today is suicidal behavior with overcontrolled clients. A lot of discussion therapeutically revolves around clients who are under controlled. Classically, those are going to be people with BPD, but not a lot of conversation is out there with clients who are overcontrolled. Now, unfortunately, I had a client who had to make a tough call exactly what the devil her situation was. So I'm going to get into her suicide attempt, what went into my clinical thinking, and trying to give some sort of practical information here of like how the heck do you actually do what you need to do in Jerusalem to get people committed against their will.
Yes. Okay.
Not an easy situation.
No.
So a little bit of background with the client. The background here is we're talking about a 19-year-old Canadian made Aliyah. She's biologically female, but she identifies as non-binary in terms of her gender identity. Pronouns are unspecified, so I'm just going to proceed calling her a she. The population of people who are suffering a sudden onset of gender dysmorphia is highly likely you're going to be running into suicide. Research shows it's not necessarily because they have gender dysmorphia. Activists make that claim, but it doesn't pan out in the research. When you actually do deconstruction studies and factor analysis, it really doesn't add up. This population is incredibly burdened by multiple comorbidity, and we're going to be seeing this in this case as well. That basically the only thing this person unfortunately wasn't diagnosed with was narcissism. Short of that, we're looking at a pretty tough case. Dropped out of university due to that symptomology. Parents reached out to me and they're reporting anxiety, depression. She was isolating herself, wasn't leaving the house. Keeping within her room, not even leaving her room except to go to the bathroom and to look for food, basically. But that was about it. Like I said, in terms of the assessment phase, highly symptomatic. We're looking at multiple personality disorders. What's on the screen here is the SCL90, where the scores in orange is the clinical cutoff, and her scores are in blue. So from anxiety, depression, paranoia, psychoticism, across the board, we're seeing incredibly high scores with this client. Looking at personality disorders, like I said, except for narcissism, we're looking at a pretty tough case across the board. As far as the big five is concerned, you see there's a tremendous tension here between incredibly high openness scores. Like I said, she's an artist, she plays music, very open to ideas, an incredibly intelligent person, but her neuroticism levels were also dramatic. So this is a person who's incredibly afraid and incredibly interested in the world simultaneously. So she quite literally being torn in two in terms of her experience of life. So the treatment approach I took with this client, I decided, because really we're kind of looking at either I'm going to give a classic DBT intervention here, or I went with radically open DBT. It's an incredibly different, even though they have the name DBT in it, it's an incredibly different approach therapeutically. It's much less directive. There's a strong emphasis on self-inquiry and self-discovery. And the one main reason why I chose this specifically was the high levels of rigidity, even though that, in her own assessment of herself, she sees herself as being highly agreeable. She also suffers from some severe autism, functional autism. So high levels of rigidity. As in the vindictiveness, the anger, the resentment. These were not passing emotions that you'd see in a BPD client. These were very rooted in her permanent experience of the world. So RO-DBT is designed for clients like that. The idea here is to try and increase social signaling, to understand and interpret other people in a social situation, enhance engagement, get her in the world, and as far as on my end, modeling vulnerability and connectedness. it was nice because we actually have a really good relationship, and like it's actually easy to like her. You know, she's very creative. There is a compassionate side to this person, and it's really nice working with her. But like I said, very rigid, and a lot of anger, a lot of hostility there. Mentalization was also being used to help her interpret other people's intentions. Just being able to understand emotions, what other people might be thinking, what they're feeling, why they're doing what they're doing. Emphasized emotional regulation skills, valued action as motivators. You know, she has a lot of dreams, and so that I was very much trying to leverage in terms of keeping her going as a counter narrative to the dark thoughts she was having. When she came into treatment, you know, I did a suicide assessment. It was, she had just dark thoughts. There were no plans, and she had a lot going for her. So in terms of valued action, there was a well to draw from in what she wanted to do and why she wanted to do it. As far as the sudden onset gender dysmorphia, I was taking a watch and wait approach, giving her, again, that's very much in the spirit of RO-DBT, self-inquiry. What does it mean that she has the feeling she's having about herself, even gender-wise? So that was the treatment protocol. Those were, you know, the treatment targets. You know, obviously trying to reduce some of these symptoms, get her in the world, you know, increase a situation with her family, friends, work, nurturing relationships outside of therapy, and that was happening. She was starting to hold down a job. She was making friends. She finally got out of her room, and she was, you know, really, you know, for quite a while living a pretty standard teenage life. The treatment hierarchy, I was keeping a look at the life-threatening behaviors. Therapeutic alliance ruptures were very much, you know, a center stage in this treatment, and then the rest of the work being on maladaptive overcontrol behaviors, you know, trying to get more emotionally expressive, you know, trying to reduce that hyper-detailed focus, being less cautious, reducing the rigidity and rule-governed behavior, actually having a close and tight fit with the environment, as opposed to these rules that had been created and then also predicated on the autism. So treatment outcomes here. After 3 months, like I said, things were looking really great. She was working at our local restaurant. Like I said, strong friendships. Things were really going extremely well for this client. We were seeing a dramatic drop in symptom manifestation as well. But again, before diving into the suicide aspect of this, it does help to kind of compare these two suicidal groups. Like I said, you know, most talk really is on clients with BPD. And, you know, we can kind of look at those people as under control clients, for lack of a better term. You know, like I said, these are going to be cluster B sort of issues, dramatic, erratic personality structures, very anxious attachment style, poor impulse control. And, you know, their suicide attempts are going to be almost entirely mood dependent. They're not planning anything. You know, they want to kill themselves, and then when they've calmed down, they really don't want to kill themselves. You know, it's not unheard of having a client ending up in hospital and saying, you know, like saying, really, I really don't want to kill myself anymore. I don't need to be in hospital. And that's legitimate. They really don't want to kill themselves. And the self-harm is not a secret with this group. Here was a lot different. You know, we're looking at this client, cluster A and cluster C, I mean, as well as cluster B. I mean, there was a dramatic, you know, across the board issues with personality disorders here, but I felt like with this client it was much more in this realm, avoidant attachment style, and just real social deficits and low openness. Although that's not her personality type here, her ability to interpret people she might as well have had low openness, just having that inability to interpret the world around her. You know, this demographic has higher suicide rates than people with BPD. And it's worth mentioning also, suicide thoughts are pretty common. You know, research shows about half the human population at some point in their life has thought about it. whether 20% being non-specified thoughts or 10% actually attempting it. Suicide is not so uncommon. But what we're looking at here with this demographic is this is a secret. They've decided probably by the first session that they have a plan. They know when they're going to do it. They know how they're going to do it. That there is a well thought out, rigid outline of the act of suicide, and it's going to be motivated by the isolation. It's going to be motivated by the inability to interpret social signaling and having those two high standards. So that was what we were looking at here in this case. High desire for revenge. She really was angry at the world. A powerful sense of other people having more than her, wanting to punish her family for what she perceived them as doing. So that was one motivating factor here with the attempt. And also there was this aspect of, almost like the play validating her idea of a just world, that this is not a world that fits her, that while other people are deserving of her not being here, that it's right, it's correct, it's proper that she should not be alive. So again, not mood governed. This is completely rule governed behavior, and also, she also fit the bill here with romanticizing that suicide. That it was noble. It was pure. It was beautiful for her to leave the world. On top of the intense anger.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On this one. So you said that she had a massive improvement in 3 months.
Yeah, so you can.
Started walking around.
Yes.
She started.
You have to be careful of that. Yeah.
So that
Yes.
was my question. I wanted to know if you talked about the fear around getting better, which I talk about a lot.
Yeah.
Start getting a lot better.
Yeah, here in this case, it wasn't the fear of getting better. It was the fact that there were very quickly a lot of different things coming up that lost her job, running into conflict with the family, all the gains. There was natural ebb and flow, and so I definitely was trying to prepare her as best I could. In almost every other session, when I started to see, hey, this is actually taking off. She really does have a lot of great resources. She is a great human being. Of course it's gonna take off. It was gonna be, okay, man, when is the next shoe, and when's the other shoe gonna fall? And being ready for that. And it wasn't there. It just wasn't there. It just wasn't there. So, her coming in, I had done a semi-structured suicide interview. We established a safety plan, self-soothing, calming techniques, who to call, emergency numbers, and that was in place, and it looked like it was pretty good. It was only dark thoughts. There was nothing that was planned out. When the suicide was announced, like I said, there were many setbacks that happened right away. The brother, she had a brother who had moved out. He was a incredible stabilizing force in her life. As soon as he wasn't there anymore, that sent her for a tailspin. There was a lot of increase in conflict at home, fights with mom, fights with dad, and mom and dad fighting as well. They had interpersonal, interrelationship conflict between the two of them. And she lost her job. She because of anxiety, she refused to interact with customers at the restaurant. She was only holding back in the kitchen, and just because she was willing to do less, she was making less money and getting paycheck after paycheck that didn't add up to everybody else's. She was furious. She had an explosion. She verbally and quite near physically attacked her boss and lost that job pretty quick. Lost friends. They reached out, even after such an explosion. This is a really nice person, at heart. She really has that part of her. People reached out, friends who had been there with her for quite some time, and she just rejected them. She saw them as being fake, lying to her. The phobia is definitely manifesting, and she kicked them out of her life. she started even picking fights with random people and went back to her room. She stopped going out on her walks, and so we were right back to square one. Except now we have a lot more hopelessness, a lot more hopelessness than what was there originally. As soon as this was happening, I raised concerns with her parents. I said, really watch her. I don't like where this is going. She hadn't admitted to me at that time that she had any plans, and at that stage I was taking a motivational interviewing approach, because there was that teeter-tottering ambivalence going on, and just getting her talking about her plans, getting her talking about the future, spelling out in detail what she wanted to achieve. I was really hoping to cash in on her values and her hope for her future, and all the things she wanted to do to keep her in the game and make a second go of things and recover from all of these losses that really happened within a week's time. So all of these were very sudden. The suicide attempt. So I got a text Tuesday night that she had already attempted suicide. She had downed half a bottle of Acamol, and that she was going to make another attempt, and she was discontinuing therapy. That was the text I received. So apparently that had happened early Monday, this suicide attempt. So immediately I called up her parents, what is going on, and they were already in bed. They had decided not to do anything. They just kind of wrote it off as this is another piece of drama. It's a headache. They don't want to deal with it. But my sense of it was this was serious. She had made the attempt, and a part of it was that she didn't really understand how to do it, so to speak. There was a lack of understanding. One can write off, it was only half a bottle of Tylenol. Like, sure, that's serious, but does she really mean it? I think that's where the parents were coming from, that they thought it was more of a cry for help than anything else. But this, I don't believe, was a cry for help. She simply didn't know how to do it right, unfortunately. Fortunately for us, but unfortunately having that detachment, even in the act. So I told them they definitely need to contact emergency services. I'm going to call her up immediately. I'm going to get a sense of what's going on here. And at that point I put into the RO-DBT has a pretty well outlined suicide protocol of how to try and talk down a client. It's really pulling on the guilt, honesty, trust, the values that are going to be held tightly by the client. So it's not like a BPD client where you have this question, you don't want to positively reinforce this behavior. How much do you actually say? Oftentimes, given the case with BPD clients, you have neutral face. You're not really showing much concern. You might even say you don't have any phone call privileges for the week. There is actually in normal DBT a punisher is often used in these cases. So this is the exact opposite. You are really diving deep to pull out the emotion here. Help me understand, what set this off? What are you trying to tell me? Have I invite criticism? How did I fail you here? What did I say anything that triggered this? You're validating that, sure, that she, this person has these plans. You understand where they're coming from. But at the same time, you're really trying to pull on the heartstrings to convince this client, please stay with me. I really care about you. You're an important person in my life. You're an important person in your family's life. Getting them thinking about their family obligation, cashing in on that rigidity, their obligation to stay alive. While you're doing this, you're trying to maintain a loose balance here. Even though it's highly emotionally charged, these are very big, I don't know what I would do without you statements are very emotionally charged. You're trying to do it in a very almost laid back sort of way, because the more pressure you put on this client in intensity can backfire. So you're trying to get the message across while simultaneously not you mean the words, but you don't want to be full throttle with them. So you're doing eye wags, winks. You're leaning back in your chair. The pace is slow. A lot of open gestures. There's safety here. This is okay. Nothing bad's going to happen here. I'm not threatening you. Sort of physical gestures. Taking breaks. Hey, let's get a coffee. I couldn't exactly do that over the phone, but to start schmoozing about random stuff just to bring the emotional intensity down. While then hiking it back up. So there is this seesaw effect. Past that, okay, practically speaking, what can we do to get rid of, is there Tylenol still? Can you flush that? Is there anything that can hurt you? Okay, let's get rid of that. Regulating behavior, is a key factor here. Trying to get the person to be self-inquiring, like what exactly is motivating you here? What exactly are you trying to do here? Who are you trying to punish? Is that really going to punish people? So that was the protocol I jumped into. It was about an hour and a half of that seesaw of moving in, backing out, moving in, backing out. It didn't go anywhere. She threatened to hang up on me the entire time and wouldn't. But at a certain point, it was like, I'm tired. I gotta go. She just couldn't maintain the conversation, but she didn't want to reject me either, which was a good sign. That was a very good sign. But despite that, I didn't get a commitment out of her to not go through with it. I had an indication she was going to go through with it, and so I called mom and dad, and we got emergency services in there to sort out the situation. What happened? After 4 hours of emergency services being there, they could not get her committed. She, even though, my opinion, like the scores were kind of showing, there was an element of psychoticism present, from the get-go. She was definitely a danger to herself and others, and she was wanting to discontinue therapy. Those 3 requirements in Israel are enough to get someone committed. The people on the scene, they didn't see it. They didn't want to take my word for it, and they let her be. Well, the following day she tried again, and this time she used 2 bottles of Tylenol. Despite the fact that I had written a note to the psychiatra mechuzi, the district psychiatrist, once emergency services don't commit the person forcibly, you as a therapist have the option here of saying, you know what, you guys are wrong. You call up the district psychiatrist, you write a letter, explain the situation, and they should be, in theory, be available 24/7. In reality, not. Here are the numbers I called. These are the emails that I was able to get a hold of. I got no answers from them. I wrote my letter. I emailed it in. I got nothing out of them. And as far as I can see, they never got involved one bit, despite the repeated calls, repeated emails. It was quite an adventure even trying to track down these numbers. Nobody knew what they were. The police did not know who to call. When I called up a particular hospital that should have, a psychiatric hospital, they should have had numbers. They didn't have numbers. The lady I talked to said Google it. That's what I had in this case. So I Googled it, and this is what I came up with. She was put in hospital the second round, and they decided there was definitely those three issues were at play, and she was committed finally after the second attempt. Take away from the case. It was a complicated case. It was a hard call in terms of how to exactly diagnose her to begin with. But it was more a story of the failures of the system than anything else to get her taken care of sooner, as opposed to having to wait it out and have that second suicide attempt. But as of now, she's in hospital. Things seem to be going well. She's finally on medication, which she had been refusing for a while, and so it looks like there's a pretty decent shot here of a recovery with this client.